I'm Shay, I'm 17. I'm a trans guy and I'm bisexual.
My name is Hunter. I'm 15 years old. I am gender fluid and pansexual.
Trans guy means that I was assigned female at birth, but I certainly do not identify that way. It didn't really work out, and so I identify as male.
Gender fluid to me means that I switch between kind of all genders. Well, for me, not equally. I identify more with masculine gender fluid, so I can switch between any gender, whether that's within the male-female spectrum or outside or in between that, though I'll stick more to the masculine androgynous side. Pansexual means that I can be attracted to anyone of any gender.
I'd say mainly that people just don't know what anything means. So when you tell them like how you identify or anything like that, they just don't understand, or they like have their own preconceived notions about what exactly it means. So it makes for a lot of bad experiences, I think.
The hardest thing for me is people you don't really know whether people are going to be safe with what you say. So depending whether they understand it or not or have heard it before, they may have some preconceived notion of what it means, or they may not know it all and think you're making it up or think it's wrong, and you can't really immediately tell whether that person will be safe to explain it to.
Coming out for me was a process, because I originally came out to my mom with my sexuality a few months before I came out with my gender. So I ended up coming out twice, which was stressful both times. And I don't know, I like to do things with humor. So I actually came out in a joke shop where there was like a little gag thing. There was a little LGBT section, and I pointed at something and I said, "Hey, that's me." And then my mom was like, "What?" And yeah, that was pretty funny. But otherwise, they reacted well. So it was a good experience, I think. But it was really nerve-wracking, and it took a while for them to come to terms with my gender also.
Coming out for me was a little all over the place. It was all out of order. I think I originally came out to one of my friends because I'd figured out that I'd liked some girl, and then I didn't really realize at the time that made me anything but straight, because at the time I was identifying as female. And yeah, but I ended up telling my friends, like, "Oh, yeah, I like this girl." And they're like, "Wait, so you're bi too?" And I'm like, "What? What does that mean?" "Oh, I guess I am." And from there, it kind of became this whole story of exploration in which I ended up discovering that I was also trans. I originally identified as trans male, and literally the day after I had figured that out, I told a couple people at school, and then a few months later I came out to my dad kind of on accident when we were talking about LGBT issues. We were at a restaurant, and I had planned to come out as just like my sexuality, so I came out as pan, and the question that he followed up with was, "So what gender does that make you?" And that led to a whole explanation, and I ended up telling him that I was a guy. And then I ended up coming out to my whole classroom, and that was definitely an experience, because my class had been my family for 3 years, so there was a lot of worry on how they'd react. There's a lot of different people with a lot of different views, and I ended up coming out to a few individually through a note, but then every time I did that, they kept saying, "Oh, you should just announce it to the whole class and see how it is." And everyone was really accepting of all that. And later, I had came out to my mom with my sexuality, but there had been things in the past that she had said that made me nervous about coming out to her as trans. But then when my mom went to go talk to one of my teachers for an overnight trip, the whole thing kind of got leaked out, and apparently my dad had told her anyway, so I felt a little betrayed by that, but at least I knew that it was safe.
One of the biggest things that adults can do is to do a little bit of research on what exactly terms mean. And so when a kid, for instance, uses one of the terms, they don't offend the kid or make them feel uncomfortable or have them explain what it means, even if especially if they're supposed to be someone who is a figure of authority, who's supposed to know what they're talking about.
I think one of the biggest things adults can do to help people who are coming out is, well, for one, to know the definitions of terms or just look into the background, but also making sure that they understand what those terms mean to the person who is coming out, as well as what they're comfortable with other people knowing and what they're comfortable with sharing. And regardless of what they identify as, what they want to be presented as to the rest of society.
One thing that did change when I came out in terms of sexuality was my parents got really odd about sleepovers, because I don't know, I'm a good kid. Like, I wouldn't do anything bad during sleepovers. I just wanted to have sleepovers with my friends, but they started being really picky about who I slept over with, and because I was bi, they basically made the rule that I couldn't have sleepovers with anyone, which was a bit odd. It was quite annoying, because I just wanted to have a fun time with my friends, and that's pretty much it. And it didn't really make me a different person than I was before I had come out. I was always the same person. So the fact that they had different rules for me based on some new obscure information that they had just gotten their hands on was kind of annoying.
I've felt pretty lucky overall with what has been restricted to me when it came to coming out with both my sexuality and gender. But there have been a few times with adults that I've met for only temporary periods at school. Like the first day of high school, it got off to a pretty bad start because I had to go see the nurse to clear up some medical things, and we got really off topic, and she started asking, oh, wait, so you said you're going to be using the male restrooms? And went on this whole thing about how I can't be allowed because it'll make other kids uncomfortable. And it turned out she didn't have any authority to say that anyway. She ended up getting in a lot of trouble for saying that, but for the entire day I was kind of panicking about what I was allowed to do, whether I actually would be making people uncomfortable, even though everyone else that I had talked to was really accepting of everything. And there have been times where we'll have well, this hasn't really applied since I got the legal name change, but originally when I still had my birth name on rosters where there would be a substitute that would come in and they would read the name on the roster, and then someone would try to correct them and be like, oh no, he identifies with the name Hunter. And then for a few times with substitutes, they're like, no, I will not say that your birth name is your real name. That is all I will ever go by. Some advice I give to a young adult who's looking for help, whether it's with a personal issue or coming out or figuring out your own identity with whatever that may encompass, would be doing your own research into who you might think you are, seeing how other people who identify similarly, what their experiences are and what they did to get through that, as well as if you do have a friend who you know you can trust, tell them what you can, just to get it out there, because it's a lot to just hold on to yourself.
Yeah, friends are a really big resource in that, and usually in larger cities there are LGBT centers that you can go to, that you can contact or email, and those are really valuable as well. I think that adults and just generally people don't really understand about LGBT people dating each other is that it's really just the exact same thing as straight people dating each other. It's pretty much no different, and usually people have this hypersexualized notion of how LGBT people interact with each other, but it's really not the case, because like people, it's the exact same thing.
And another notion a lot of people overall will have is that if you're queer and there's someone else who's queer, you're automatically going to date them, and it doesn't matter what their personality is or how you connect. It's like, oh, well, there's so little of you. The moment you find another one of you, you're probably just going to connect and be together forever.
Yeah, something that adults can do to make sure that LGBT people feel safe and supported in their relationships and everything is to really just trust what the kid is saying, because the moment that you ask the question, oh, are you sure, is the moment that they're going to stop trusting that adult, just because they feel like they're not actually telling the truth, whether it be subconsciously or consciously.
Another thing is make a romantic relationship as much of a big deal as you would if it was a straight relationship. Like, if you weren't going to ask a whole bunch of questions about the sexuality of a straight person and the partners they're dating and such, then why would you do it for your kid who happens to be in a queer relationship? Well, the term queer is kind of more of an umbrella term now for the overall LGBT community, or at least those who are comfortable with using it. It does have a lot of stigma in the past, as it was used as more of an insult, and more recently it has been reclaimed as just more of a way of identifying without getting too specific. Though there are times that if it's just thrown around it can be uncomfortable, but those who identify with it, it's pretty okay to use.
Yeah, just never use it for someone who hasn't actually said that they are comfortable with using the term, because for a lot of people it does still mean for them an insult, while even though a lot of the community is trying to reclaim that term.
Well, for sex ed, for us anyway, because we go to the same school, we got pretty lucky with that, because our school is very inclusive, or tries to be as inclusive as possible. We ended up getting a group who did pretty inclusionary sex ed, though it was kind of strange because the first day we had this activity, I think, where we had to separate into groups of girls and guys, and at the time we were both identifying as gender fluid, and we kind of separated off into our own group, and we were supposed to write out like stereotypes about our own genders and how that really affects things. And it was kind of funny because there was these two large groups and just the two of us sitting off in our own corner.
Like, what do we do? Yeah, but I mean, initially I lived in Georgia, so my middle school sex ed was a lot different than my sex ed that I've had in high school, because like it was pretty much all abstinence based. There was nothing LGBT about it. There was no mention whatsoever. It was pretty confusing. There was nothing, and it was kind of like a shock to my system to come to Denver and have everyone actually be a lot more accepting than they were back in Georgia. And especially with our school, which is brand new, we're going to be part of the first graduating class, so that's pretty cool. And it was a huge difference, and it really did make a lot of an impression coming here and having this sex ed as opposed to the one that I had in Georgia.